What happened to US Airways Flight 1549? How Captain Chesley Sullenberger made the impossible decision, and why this day will always be remembered in the world of aviation and beyond. On January 15, 2009, US Airways Flight 1549 was scheduled to fly from LaGuardia Airport in New York City to Charlotte, North Carolina. It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon, and most passengers were preparing for a routine 90-minute flight. The plane, an Airbus A320, was relatively small by commercial standards, but well equipped for the short domestic trip. For the crew, this was just another day in the skies. Captain Chesley Sullenberger, known as Sully, was at the controls, accompanied by First Officer Jeffrey Skiles. Both were seasoned pilots, with Sully bringing decades of experience, including a background in military aviation. He had flown numerous aircraft throughout his career, but even with his experience, nothing could fully prepare him for what was about to unfold. The plane took off smoothly at around 3:25 p.m. Everything was running as expected. However, just 2 minutes after takeoff, something unexpected and catastrophic happened. As the plane climbed to an altitude of about 3,000 feet, it encountered a large flock of Canada geese. The birds were sucked into the plane's engines, resulting in an immediate violent impact. As passengers looked out their windows, they likely saw the birds approaching, but in just seconds, those birds became a major hazard. When they hit the engines, it caused both of them to fail, a situation so rare that most pilots only read about it in manuals. In a split second, the roaring engines fell silent. Passengers heard loud bangs and felt the plane jolt. Panic spread quickly as people tried to understand what was happening. Inside the cockpit, Sully and Skiles were facing an emergency situation with almost no time to react. They had trained for engine failure scenarios, but a complete dual engine failure at such a low altitude was a scenario very few pilots would encounter in their careers. The Airbus A320 had no power and without engines was effectively a glider. At this point, Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Skiles had only a few seconds to assess their options. With LaGuardia behind them and Teterboro Airport a few miles away, they had to decide quickly where to attempt an emergency landing. Skiles began working through the checklist for an engine restart, trying to bring back power to at least one engine. But the engines were too damaged. Restarting them wasn't an option. They were losing altitude rapidly, and Sully made the decision that would define his legacy. They wouldn't try for an airport. They would attempt a water landing on the Hudson River. This was a risky move, to say the least. Landing a commercial airliner on water is almost unheard of, and the survival rates for such landings are typically low. But in Sully's mind, the Hudson was the only safe option. With tall buildings and densely populated areas on both sides, attempting a landing on land would have endangered countless lives. Both in the plane and on the ground, Sully took control, guiding the plane toward the river, and communicated to air traffic control. "We're going to be in the Hudson." His calm tone reflected his focus, but everyone knew the gravity of what was about to happen. He made an announcement to the passengers. "Brace for impact." Flight attendants hurried through the aisle, instructing passengers to brace themselves. Passengers gripped their seats and held onto each other. Many were praying, some were in shock, and everyone was hoping for a miracle. In the cockpit, Sully and Skiles were entirely focused. Sully carefully lined up the plane with the river, making constant adjustments to control the descent. Landing a plane on water is extraordinarily challenging. The aircraft must be at the perfect angle. Too steep, and it could flip. Too shallow, and it could break apart on impact. Sully had one chance to get it right. At 3:31 p.m., just 6 minutes after takeoff, US Airways Flight 1549 touched down on the Hudson River. Against the odds, Sully managed to execute a near-perfect water landing. The plane skidded across the water, sending waves high into the air but remaining mostly intact. Passengers felt the jarring impact, but remarkably, there was no explosion, no fire, just the plane slowing as it glided on the river's surface. The passengers and crew had survived the initial impact, But they weren't safe yet. The plane began taking on water, and with freezing temperatures outside, hypothermia was a real threat. The icy waters of the Hudson were now flooding the cabin, and passengers had to act fast. The icy waters of the Hudson were now flooding the cabin, and passengers had to act fast. Within minutes, nearby ferries, boats, and emergency responders were converging on the scene. New York waterway ferries were some of the first to arrive, pulling passengers from the water and providing warmth and safety. The frigid temperatures made the situation even more challenging, but the quick response from the ferry captains and rescue teams was crucial. In less than 24 minutes, everyone was off the plane. Miraculously, all 155 people aboard had survived. This remarkable feat was later called the Miracle on the Hudson. Thanks to Sully's decision-making, Skyle's support, the calm cooperation of the crew and passengers, and the rapid response of New York's emergency services, a potential disaster was averted.